Another edition of Mike versus the world. Here, I'll play the part of the world. Mike, here's the first one for you. We saw the college football playoff rankings come out. And somebody around here wants to make an argument that Clemson could be, and maybe even should be, ranked as high as number 2 in the rankings. I'm going to take the side of this is absolute lunacy at this point in time. While Clemson may be a decent football team, and they certainly deserve to be in the conversation in that top 4, I don't think you can bring them up to number 2. I don't know what their signature win is. I don't know what their consistency has been this year. I don't even know if they're a really good football team when it's all said and done. I think a lot of this is them feasting on a weak ACC. There have been a couple of teams good, but I mean, who's the bell cow team in the ACC that you can point to and say, hey, wow, I can't believe they beat that program. What a great win that has been. In some cases, they've been a tad underwhelming at times. While they're certainly deserving of the top 4, I don't know that you put them top 2. I think when you think about Tennessee, you think about Georgia, you think about Ohio State, Michigan. I could see 4. I have no issue with them being over Michigan, but in my mind, Clemson should not be as high as number 2. I think they're 3-4 is probably their ceiling.
So shouldn't this be about like actual results rather than sort of, preseason polls or expectations of what and how good a team
I agree.
is?
Neither of those two things I said. I have no truck in either of those two things.
Yeah, but I'm saying, so what's Ohio State's signature win? Penn State?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So Michigan shares the same one.
Yeah. What's Clemson's?
And the 6-2 win. Well, so let's say Penn State's a better win than Clemson has. Clemson has 3 of them, and they're not great world beating. They didn't beat Alabama like Tennessee. That's why we're not even debating whether Tennessee should be number 1. Georgia's got Oregon, and nobody else on their schedule that they've beaten is any good. Ohio State and Michigan, both you could make an argument to be ahead of Clemson. They've got Penn State and nobody else good. Clemson beat Wake, NC State, and Syracuse. Now, okay, those teams, this is why I'm saying it's based on preseason poll. It's based on 10,000-foot perception. It's based on, Wake Forest sucks. NC State sucks. Syracuse sucks. The ACC sucks. That's everybody saying that. But actual results on the field, there's a reason for some reason. Wake Forest was the top 25 team. So was Syracuse. So was NC State. When Clemson beat them, that's 3 top 25 wins. Now, again, you go back to Ohio State beat number 5 Notre Dame, but that didn't really pan out. Notre Dame's not very good, and we've learned that. At least Wake Forest, NC State and Syracuse have been solid teams, and they've got 3 quality wins as opposed to Georgia, which is 1, and I'll give you Ohio State and Michigan with 1, but I don't see more than 1.
Did Syracuse play recently?
Yeah, they just lost to Notre Dame. I know. I get it.
The team you said that just said wasn't really good win. Now we're throwing bouquets for Syracuse for losing to Notre Dame. I guess this is no disrespect against.
No. But Notre Dame
disrespect against Syracuse and NC State and Wake Forest, but I don't know if any of those 3 teams are really going to be are really any good. NC State, if ECU has a kicker, North Carolina State loses in week 1 to ECU. I mean, I don't know that those are great wins. I'm not saying any of them have great wins. By the way, to your point, it's really Tennessee, right? Tennessee's got that signature win with Alabama.
Right.
Georgia's got a really nice win against Auburn. The rest of them, though, are in there to go, okay, well, yeah, sure, maybe this team's better than that team. That's why I don't think they're 2. I think you take Tennessee, Georgia, signature wins. You kind of know what you're going to get. Have they played up to every level of expectation? I think that we have. Georgia's also got to smash people 70-0. And if they win 48-21, we all freak out and say they're not any good anymore. They've got 2 signature wins. I don't disagree. Clemson isn't in that conversation. I just don't think they're as high as 2. I think they can get there, sure, if they win out and some other things take place. But off ranking 1, I'm perfectly fine with them not being in that 2 spot. I think, if anything, they're number 2, but not the number 2 you want.
And listen, I'm not saying, like, from a logical standpoint, okay, so we take into play Tennessee's resume more so than their recent results. That's just the way it is, and that's great because Tennessee has actually beaten an LSU team and an Alabama team, like 2 top 10 programs. So there's no debate there, but we're doing that based on current results. Georgia, we're doing based on national championship last year. Ohio State, we're doing it based on they're always good. They're always the best team, except for last year in the Big Ten. And Michigan, we're basing it on they were a playoff team last year. That's how I look at it, where, Georgia's beaten Oregon was a great win. 49-3. Oregon's turned out to be, the number 11 team in the country. They're a good football team. That's a great quality win. Samford, South Carolina, Kent State, Missouri, Auburn, Vanderbilt, Florida. All of these teams suck. They've beaten all of them. Okay, they struggle with Missouri and they struggle a little with Kent State, but they've won all these football games except for Missouri by 10 or more points. And that's great. But we're giving them the benefit of the doubt as an undefeated team based on the fact that they're in the SEC and they're the reigning national champion. We're giving Clemson a little bit of disrespect because they're in the ACC. The ACC has historically been bad. Clemson didn't make the playoff last year. So my point is, if we're going to look at Tennessee based on what they did this year, because they haven't been good in recent years, then why aren't we looking at Clemson based on what they did this year? It's just, to me, it's very pick your argument type of mentality. And my say here is that there's an argument that can be made logically that Clemson has better wins than Ohio State and better wins than Georgia and could be number 2. I just don't see how that could be argued against without taking into the SEC and recent, history with Ohio State in the Big Ten.
Are you? I thought, is this Mike Farrell? Are you new to college football? Are you new to this? I mean, I felt like this is well established at the SEC. This is what we do every year, right? This is the blueprint and the template. I'm not saying it's
right?
agreeable. I'm not saying it's agreeable.
What about the Big Ten? Ohio State. Where's your argument there?
For them, what, being 2 or not 2?
I had a Clemson. With the SEC bias, okay, let's take that and say that's why Georgia's ahead of Clemson. What's your Ohio State bias?
Again, I think their win against Penn State is better than what you trotted out for me about Syracuse, about Wake Forest, and about NC State. Like, I just think that's a better win overall. But you also have to factor too, Mike. I think this is looking at the teams objectively and saying who's got more talent. Who do we think's the better football team? And I think if you look at Clemson, they certainly haven't played up to, I think, what we expect out of Clemson, and they've had games to do that. I think Ohio State is more so a series of, have they really been tested, right? And so I think that's the argument that I would make is we've seen Clemson sort of prod along, get some wins, and not look great, but do some stuff. But Ohio State hasn't been tested yet. They're going to get that test opportunity. Clemson, I mean, they barely eke out a win with Florida State. Right. They barely win that Wake Forest game, by the way, if we're going to be honest. And they barely win that Syracuse game. And these are all less than 10-point games.
Yeah, but all winning programs.
These are all less than 10-point games. These are not smashing results.
Florida State's above 500. NC State's above 500. A lot of teams are above 500.
A lot of teams are above 500.
No. I mean,
a lot are. Yeah.
Arkansas State, Wisconsin, Rutgers, Michigan State, Iowa. None of those teams are above 500. And they're all on Ohio State's resume as victories. And so, Toledo is a good MAC team. Notre Dame has rebounded, and now they're a winning football team. So that's Notre Dame is a winner, Toledo's a winner, and Penn State's a winner.
You sit here today and say everything you've seen so far, Clemson's the second best team in the country.
See, again, you're talking about what we see, okay? How about results? I'm just saying results, okay? So, that's where we get caught up in how good Ohio State is. They got Trevion Henderson. They got C.J. Stroud. He's a Heisman favorite, blah, blah, blah. Bunch of first rounders. Ohio State always puts kids in the NFL. Here we go. They always make the playoff, and if they don't, Michigan did last year. It's all about what you see. Now, would Clemson be an underdog to Ohio State in the Vegas betting line? Yes, but I'm talking about what they have done on the football field. It's even, I think it's hard for you to argue. I'm going to mention these teams, okay? And none of them are world beaters, okay? Georgia Tech, not a world beater, not a winning football program. Furman, Louisiana Tech, not great. Wake Forest, winning program. NC State, winning program. Boston College sucks. Florida State, winning program. Syracuse, winning program. They got 4. What's that?
1 by 6, 1 by 6, 1 by 5, 1 by 10.
Don't care how you win. I really don't. I just don't. you win, you win. This is where the style points come into play, I guess. Ohio State's record
is Marshall better than Notre Dame?
They were that day.
Is Appalachian State better than Texas A&M? Actually, probably. By the way.
Well, I think Marshall might be better than Notre Dame too.
I understand play the results, but sometimes the result doesn't tell the full story.
I'm not going to get into excuses. Garrett Schrader got hurt, blah, 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 blah. Syracuse lost one of their defensive backs.
Just did. Yeah.
I don't get into any of that crap because I could justify the fact that Penn State is overrated and they just got throttled by two teams. Not throttled. I mean, Ohio State game was fairly close, but they got beaten pretty soundly by both, Michigan and Ohio State. And I could poke holes in Penn State's resume like crazy. And we could get down into the, East Carolina almost beat NC State and how good are they? We can get into that. I'm just looking at 8-0 football teams. Who's got the better wins? Tennessee by far is number one. Then there's an argument. Is it Georgia? Is it Clemson? Is it Ohio State? Is it Michigan? I don't even think you could bring Michigan in here because they played, honestly, they started the season, I think, with 4 of the worst football programs in the country.
Well, if we're doing that, Mike, then why aren't we throwing TCU in here then? They're also 8-0 with wins against Oklahoma, Kansas, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State.
That's a very good point, and I was waiting for you to make that one. So Mike versus the world can't be like 6 different points, but you could make an argument, and we could do this on a separate video, but there's no point because we're diving into it now. You could make an argument that TCU should be ranked number 2. Now, let's put them against Clemson. Let's knock Ohio State and Georgia out of this for this second, right? Number 18, Oklahoma at the time. Number 19, Kansas at the time. Number 8, Oklahoma State at the time. And number 17, Kansas State at the time. More top 25 wins than even Clemson. Colorado's one of the worst teams. Tarleton, I don't even know what that is. SMU has been a disappointment. West Virginia is West Virginia. But, then you fast forward to see how these teams have done since. And that's where your Syracuse argument is, right? They lost to Clemson, then they lost to Notre Dame. Oklahoma's turned into a mess. Kansas has turned into sort of a one-hit wonder, so to speak. Yeah. Kansas State's legitimate. Oklahoma State's been exposed by Kansas State. But, yeah, an argument could be made for TCU as well. I think TCU and Clemson, TCU especially getting screwed here. But I honestly think Clemson's getting screwed because of their conference and no other reason. That's it. We all think SEC's number 1, Big Ten's number 2.
I don't think that. I think it factors in, Mike, but I think that people just look at Clemson. The reality is they're also a victim of their own success. We've seen really great Clemson teams, right? We've seen really great quarterback play out of Clemson. You expect that. You thought that's what you're going to get. And while certainly DJ Uiagalelei's, results aren't horrific, I think there was expectations there. I think people look at Clemson and say they should be throttling teams, and they're not doing that. I think that's probably more of the argument, is that they haven't looked dominant on the field right now. And I understand your point about Ohio State also not looking dominant in some respects, but I think people know that gear is there for Ohio State. We just haven't had to see it yet. I think there's questions whether or not Clemson has that gear. Can they win games? Can they win games by 5 and 6 points? Probably. But I wonder if people are looking at it more so as we haven't seen Clemson team. We think we've seen a Clemson that's reached their ceiling and they're winning ball games. And maybe there's an Ohio State team that has some runway left on it, and that's what we're voting for.
I understand what you're saying. So when did a gear factor come into play in the college football playoff rankings?
When does anything come into fact? I mean, the committee's able to throw whatever they want in there, though, Mike. That's the crux of your argument, is you want it to be like a church pew hymn where they only do 3 things, and there's all these other factors that are always going to be at play. Every year there's always something.
Listen, if I apply for a job, I don't know if you're in human resources, you could be in the CIA. I have no idea what you do. I know you argue, and I know you're good at it, but it's very cryptic what you do, and I don't want to know what you do. But I will say this: if I apply, let's say you're a human resource person, for a job, and my resume says that I almost got this job, and man, if I was feeling better that week, I would have got this job. And I got a gear, man, it could be there. It could be there. You're going to hire me? No, you're going to look at my resume. And you say, what have you done? And this is what I'm going to base the hiring on. And that's what the college football playoff committee should be doing. It's what have you done? Not what gear you have, not this excuse or that excuse, or not that. Listen, you could make an argument that Clemson has played to their expectations because everybody expected DJ to be benched. Nobody expected them to be dominant. Some people expected them to lose by now. And you could make a bigger argument that Ohio State's played down. Worse than that. I mean, Ohio State.
You drag me into an HR resume argument here that I feel like I have to respond to. If I looked at your resume and you had all this experience, and I would look at your results, sales numbers up, whatever that results business was, right? And that was your resume. And then I had another candidate whose maybe results were right where yours were at. They have a PhD in some great philosophy. I would go, hey, this kid's got some runway here based on what I see here. Where this resume, this guy over here, Steinmetz Junior High. Like that's how I would judge that, right? So there's results, and then there's what do you think about where this person's potential is? I think the potential for Ohio State to be better is, I think Clemson is solid, but have they reached their potential? Congratulations on having that AA degree.
Thank God we're going to have Ohio State tested in the upcoming weeks. Thank the Lord, because I got Northwestern, Indiana, and Maryland. Thank God. Thank God we're finally putting them through a gauntlet of a schedule after Wisconsin, Rutgers, Michigan State, and Iowa. Phew! Now we're going to really see that here.
So based off your argument then, Mike, then what we should do every year is we should look at all the teams in the conference and we should assign like PowerPoints. Right. Like, so if you're in the Big 10's down, like you lose just certain points because you're in a bad conference, right? You can only play you can play in some respects. How you play them is a whole different story. But basically what you're saying is, hey, at the beginning of the year, the Big 10's going to suck. So you know what? You all minus 10 confidence points no matter what you do because your conference sucks. And SEC, you guys are good. So +3. And ACC, you're bad. So -5.
That's what's happening to Clemson.
But you're mad at the ACC for doing that. But yet you're also mad that the Big 10 has these cupcake opponents.
I'm mad at the college football playoff committee.
Everybody is
starting the season with those -10 points for Clemson because of the ACC and not punishing Ohio State or Michigan.
I don't think those -10 all come just because of the ACC. I think there's some part of Clemson not always playing at their best, where they go, all right, this team is good, but I don't know that it's. I think if I had to give you the pie percentage here, I think there's a large percentage that are probably ACC hatred in some respects, right? But I think there's also a part that says like, Clemson's not playing great. They're winning games, but are they really a good football team? They are a good football team, but are they the second best in the nation? Not so much.
I think we also thought the Big 10 was going to be better. I really did. I think a lot of people thought the Big 10 was going to be better. I think they thought Wisconsin was going to be a good win for Ohio State, and they turned out to be a 4-4 football team. Michigan State won 11 games last year. Notre Dame, as we mentioned, preseason number 5 team. They're not in the Big 10, but that schedule itself, oh my gosh, they got Notre Dame. Oh my gosh, Wisconsin's always a good football team. Oh my gosh, Michigan State won 11 last year. Oh my gosh, Iowa, always a contender in the West. They suck this year. So it's like, that's the thing, that these preseason polls, they should be wiped out. The college football playoff committee should look at what's happened. Oh, geez, Wisconsin's not a quality win now. Michigan State's not a quality win. Notre Dame, way overranked. And just look at it that way. So that's my argument. It's not, listen, I'm not dying on a hill saying Clemson's the second best football team in the country. I don't even know if Tennessee's the best football team in the country. We're going to find out this weekend. And you could certainly convince me one way or the other that Georgia's a better football team and that Ohio State's a better football team. But an argument has to be made that if you're looking on results, and TCU, I hear you, I feel you. You should be in this discussion as well. Those two teams got screwed. They got screwed. And Michigan fans are all bitching, oh my God, we're 5th. How are we behind Clemson? The combined record of Michigan's opponents this year is 30-36. That's horrible. And they're lucky Maryland's 6-2. Because if Maryland was the average football team we expected to be 3-3, they beat nobody. Cupcakes. And I think we're realizing that Penn State might be you're going to hate this reference, Mr. Human Resources, but I don't really have a boss.
I actually don't even work in human resources, by the way.
Penn State might be that average-looking girl in high school that goes out with everybody.
What do you mean?
It's just not a good.
I know what you mean. I'm kidding. Please don't explain. Please don't explain.
No. Let me explain. It's not impressive to date them. It's not impressive to beat Penn State. Penn State, they get beat some crappy teams, but then when it comes prime time, they're 1-10 versus top 5 teams. They're 0-11 versus top 10 teams. it's not impressive to me. So, it's one of those things where, yeah, Wake, Syracuse, NC State aren't traditional powers, but are we still giving credence to Joe Paterno? Are we still believing that Ohio State is great, because they beat Wisconsin, who's traditionally a good football team? That's my argument. I think I did pretty well in this one. I don't do well in these, but I feel pretty good about
But
this one.
you're basically you're arguing that you can make an argument, right? And in theory, that's the whole reason the college football playoff is here. Everything is an argument. You
Not
could argue
everything.
1 and 2. You could argue 2 and 3. You could argue 3 and 4. You can argue 5 and 6. Everything is an argument, right?
You can't argue Notre Dame should be in the top.
But they're not. They're not in the picture, right? Like everything is an argument at this point. You could argue, and you said it earlier. Yeah, I don't even know if Tennessee's number one. That's an argument. Like you could. That's the whole reason this exists. And so knuckleheads like you and I will sit here and argue about it, and people will line their pockets. That's the whole construct here, Mike. I don't disagree that it's not messed up in some respects, and there's a better way. But the reality is, there's arguments to be had all up and down this list, right? And you could have those all day long. I just think if you look at it empirically, I don't know that you say Clemson is definitively the second best team in the nation. I think they deserve to be in the top 4 over Michigan. I actually agree with you there, but I don't know that you look at this and go, that's the second best team in the nation.
I guess I'm a little disappointed in the committee, but everybody is. I get it.
What else is new? Yeah.
Tennessee fans aren't disappointed, but when you look at the coaches poll, these are polls that things are based off. AP top 25 has Georgia number 1 and Tennessee number 2, blah, blah, blah. Coaches poll has Georgia number 1, Ohio State number 2, and Tennessee number 3. None of it makes any sense, but it dictates and it bleeds into the college football playoff rankings, and that pisses me off. It just does. It shouldn't happen. Ohio State, I'm not saying they're going to lose. The next 3 games are absolute cupcakes. Then they got Michigan. That'll be a great game and a playoff eliminator. But honestly, Ohio State's record, I think they've played teams with records that are 2 games over 500 total. I think they're like 36 and 34 or something ridiculous like that. They played nobody. Now they get even more cupcakes. Their total schedule is going to be probably teams overall with a losing record. And I don't understand why they're number 2. So again, we can agree to disagree as we always do. I'm not dying on the hill of Clemson. Clemson could Clemsoning this up, and they've got some weaknesses. But man, I really expected Ohio State to have a better schedule. It's not their fault. I expected Georgia to be more dominant, and it's not their fault. And we'll see how it plays out. But for people to say Clemson's like meh, they're not playing up to their capability. Either Ohio State and Georgia aren't either. That's my take. Let's end this.